Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Deep Dive Film School uses the footage only for purposes of education, commentary, and criticism under fair use. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School.
This week, we're going to end the John Carpenter Fest with Big Trouble in Little China from 1986.
Let's dive in. All right, everybody, it is time for Big Trouble in Little China. Whew. Big Trouble
in Little China.
So good.
Yeah.
Such a great. Normally, theme songs like at the end, like theme songs that have the name of it in there, turn out more like Dragnet. If you remember the Dragnet theme song where we had Dan Aykroyd actually rapping in it.
Buddy, we're putting this party on ice.
But don't you know we really ought to read them their rights?
Read them their rights. Read them their rights.
Oh no,
that's more of what you
rapping.
Yeah, I think he's rapping Dan Android. Dan Android.
Dan Android. Rapping like credit songs was a thing in the 90s.
It totally was.
Adam's
totally
Family.
Was. Yeah. Whoa.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yes, of course.
2 with Vanilla Ice.
Look, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is going to come up a little bit in this conversation. I think it was something that well, because what I started doing, I think, from very early on with this movie, I think we talk about doing this a lot, which is trying to imagine seeing it for the very first time, like contextually, like what is it I'm looking at here? And
for sure, honestly, it's been that long since I've seen the movie that I was almost like watching it over. We watched it last year. Here we actually had a projector and like projected it on the wall and had the music really loud, and it was really fun. 20 years for me,
but it is so unique in so many ways. Like it's there's just these moments where I'm like, this is so unlike.
It's true. I still don't know quite what to think about it, to be honest. But also thinking about it in the context of when it came out in 1986, and that there wasn't really anything like this.
Yes,
there was the action movie, when he was starting to become a big player. Kurt Russell, I mean.
Yes, of course.
And he had. This is probably pre-Tango and Cash, but kind of in that era, right? Overboard had come out, that kind of stuff. I don't know. I'm just thinking of
Captain Ron,
relevant movies. That was later in his career.
Was later in his illustrious
but the
career.
Thing had come out, so he'd worked with John Carpenter before.
And you're right, he was an up-and-comer. I think what's so interesting about this movie in terms of, yes, it's an action movie, but it's also a supernatural movie, and it's a comedy, and there's a lot of different things happening, and then just the setting, the fact that this is Chinatown.
Yeah, but this weird underground Chinatown in San Francisco, and I don't know. And this was kind of a movie that had a second life because it bombed at the box office. Right?
Yeah, which is a bummer because when they did early test,
I can see though why it bombed.
It's so strange.
Yeah,
it's so strange.
Weird movie. Like, I remember when I was a kid laughing at the movie because of its comedy. Yeah. But now I'm laughing at it because of how weird it is. Yeah. So it wasn't even that funny of a movie outside of like, what the hell is happening?
Well, you've got Kurt Russell doing this amazing like John Wayne impression basically through the whole thing. And
may the wings of liberty never lose a feather.
And these bumpers,
slick talking truck driver,
and these bumpers at the beginning and the end of him like just talking into his CB to whoever's on the line, right? And you're like,
a good John Wayne.
What is happening? Like, this is so weird, and like talking about himself in the third person, right? Like just constantly.
Chop Express.
Well, but what I love about it, the Jack Burton character is we have these heroic doofuses sort of sprinkled throughout Hollywood. I'm thinking of obviously Han Solo is one where it's like he is heroic, but just as often his blaster doesn't work. Some other good ones like that I think would be Brendan Fraser's character in The Mummy is another one that has that same kind of lovable rascal to him, but he just can't really like figure it all out.
Indiana Jones has to be one.
Oh, definitely Indiana Jones.
I think he definitely thought. I think I have a quote written down in here. Something I'm paraphrasing, but it was something that Kurt Russell said that I like this character because Jack Burton's not really a hero.
No, he isn't.
He's more of a sidekick, and you notice that you kind of expect it's kind of a typecast, and he ends up being more of a sidekick, and he's kind of fumbling around a lot, and he's like at a certain point, like, his weapon is a knife, which really isn't that great of a weapon.
He has that cool little Uzi that he uses.
But he uses that Uzi, but he also doesn't know how to use it.
Yeah.
He's like, the safety's on.
It jams, or it's wet, and so now it doesn't work.
He's not your traditional heroic thing.
You mentioned this, so let's jump into this right now, and then we can get more into the plot and delve into that. But the idea of Jack Burton being the sidekick to Dennis Dunn's character of Wang, I think, is what makes this movie work so very well, because I think that it's a scary thing when you go, we have a white director working in a white 1980s Hollywood, making a movie about Chinatown and about this sort of made-up China mysticism. You're getting really close into this sort of like Orientalism as the other kind of category, right? And that could be a scary place to be, because another movie that came out at the exact same time that made John Carpenter's skin crawl, and he was like, how the hell does this happen, was The Golden Child.
Yeah.
And this movie also, in a lot of ways, reminds me of The Golden Child. The big difference being Eddie Murphy is basically going around making fun of that kind of culture and the weirdness of it and the alienness and the othering of it so much in that movie.
I said, I want the knife.
And here, Jack Burton's character is the outsider and is the sidekick, right? I mean, he really is. Like, Wang really is the one who knows what's happening, actually has the skill set in order to be able to do what's necessary.
For sure, which kind of surprised me because that came out of nowhere. Like, all of a sudden he's like doing flips and
he says it at the very beginning, but you assume he's joking.
Yeah,
right? Because he says, like,
well, they talk about sorcery,
and they talk about martial arts, and they talk about all these different things. And I think that, again, what makes this movie work so well is that even though the mysticism is all made up, the fact that only the very beginning when he's driving his truck, and then they're at the airport, and the very, very end when he's driving the truck, is the only times that we're not in Chinatown, right? And we're in the real Chinatown. We're not, I mean, if you think about it, 1906, the earthquake happens, regular Chinatown is leveled, they rebuild it as a tourist trap kind of a place with all the dragons and crazy bullshit on the outside, like way back in the day, right? Okay. That's when they rebuilt Chinatown, because before that it was all like Victorian. I just listened a couple of weeks ago to 99% Invisible. I don't know if you listen to that podcast.
No.
It's all about design and architecture and stuff, but it tells these big history stories. If you've never seen that or heard that podcast, you should listen to it.
Nice.
It's amazing, but they talk all about Chinatown, so it was on my mind watching this, where it's like, oh, we see the storefronts of all this stuff, and it's almost like Egg Chen's character is a great sort of stand-in for what Chinatown actually is, which is you have the corny tour bus for all the white people, but once you get into his house, he has all these priceless artifacts, and he's a sorcerer, and he knows all this crazy shit. And it's like the Chinatown is the same thing. There's the fake storefronts for all the white people. Once you actually get in there, it's like there's this illustrious tapestry, this like hidden magical world of the real Chinatown, and that's what our whole movie takes place in. And I think that that's such an interesting thing, and the fact that Jack,
very different for 86 too.
Well, and Jack is like fully an outsider, to the point where the guys come in towards the end and he's like, Egg, do any of these guys speak English? And the one guy looks and he's like, Egg, who the hell is this guy? With no accent.
Yeah.
I love that there's so many Asian actors in this
pretty much
that have no accent.
Outside of Kim Cattrall and
whoever her buddy is.
And Kurt Russell.
Well, and who's her buddy that's the reporter? She's a pretty tacked on character.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about her.
But anyway, I think that's what makes this movie age in a really interesting way.
Yeah.
It saves itself from a lot of this stuff that otherwise would seem really, really dated nowadays culturally.
I agree that the sets and the backgrounds and everything were really fun and made it seem a little more authentic, and they really went for it with a lot of the stunts and stuff. The fights and stuff were pretty fun. You know, you have multiple gang fights in this movie, which is great.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting movie. It is a weird movie though.
It's very weird.
No doubt a weird movie. Like, it was hard for me to like really grasp onto a lot of the characters because it was just happened so quickly. Like, boom, he gets they're playing this game in Chinatown, and Wang's his friend.
Yes.
And he beats him, and he does a double or nothing, and he loses. And
so now he has to go with him to the airport.
But for some reason, they get sidetracked to the airport for his fiancée, and she gets kidnapped by this gang, and Kim Cattrall's there. Conveniently, also has green eyes.
Yes,
and two girls in the same place, and they get all wrapped up into each other, and it was just kind of it was fun to revisit, and I respected it a lot more once I started diving into the research about kind of what you're talking about with the historical nature of what they're talking about, and then just throwing John Carpenter's flair onto everything.
Yes.
There's so much here that's very John Carpenter, that's very memorable, and I don't know, he's looking at these 4 movies, he's always been a campy director, right?
Oh, definitely. It's there, and I think that it takes a minute to realize that camp is there, because and we talked about this with In the Mouth of Madness, that early on in his career, he was kind of taking these movies serious as a heart attack. And so if there's no camp in Halloween, there's no camp in The Fog, there's no camp in The Thing.
Yes.
And then as he starts to breathe, I think that he starts allowing this stuff in. Yeah. There is an also really interesting idea, I think, when looking at other movies that were being made around this same period of time. And you think about a movie like Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters is just as weird as this is, right? Where you're like, that before this movie, like, that didn't exist, did it? And if it did, it didn't really look and feel like this does, right?
Let's be honest, the majority of people that were watching this probably didn't really relate to Chinatown,
right,
the way that they would New York City and Ghostbusters. Exactly.
And I do think that's a really big part of it. The other thing that in doing some research that I learned is that, there's a whole subset of Chinese horror films referred to as jiangxi. They were most prevalent in the 70s and into the 80s. But I started watching some of these. There's a bunch of them on YouTube, and they're all this weird composite of zombie movies, vampire movies, kung fu movies, and then the backdrops, the set pieces, look identical to what's happening in Big Trouble in Little China. There's even a handful of them where the lead vampire, looks so much like Lo Pan. The tall hat, the robes, they're flying through the air, they're having sword fights, and it's this, but at the same time they're campy. They're purposely done really campy, guys flying around on wires, the whole 9 yards. But when you see that stuff, you go, oh. And knowing what a horror nerd Carpenter is, I'm sure that he probably loved these kinds of movies and was like, that's what I like, because when he got the script, it took place it was supposed to be a Western. It was supposed to be like a Wild West movie. So you are talking about pre-1906 earthquake Chinatown, right? So this is like old Chinatown. These are guys who were just working on the railroad that are in that movie, right?
Yep.
And they were like, they didn't have the budget for it, so they updated it to today. But I'm wondering if in that same period of time he was like, I'm going to make a jiangxi horror style movie, because the similarities between the two are like pretty noted. And so I saw that, I was like, I felt like I kind of cracked some kind of a code where I was, it's very similar to, you think about.
Do you think like Tarantino doing Kill Bill, something like that?
Yes. Of this love, this reverence for Grindhouse.
Yeah.
That literally, until he started mentioning it in interviews, guys like you and me would go in and see something like Kill Bill and think that so much of it was built out of whole cloth. But once you start watching some of these old Grindhouse kung fu flicks, you're like, oh, this is homage that's almost scene for scene, beat for beat from movies that he loves. And I think that may have been what's happening here, but you're just talking about a film nerd so many years before that film nerdity was sort of lauded the way that it was through the 90s and beyond, that maybe it just went over so many people's heads that they're like, well, that was weird. I think I didn't like it, right? And then all of a sudden it tanks at the box office. And so I'm wondering if that's
part of
what's happening.
It had a second life with DVD
big time,
and stuff
too,
I mean,
it is like they've made, you can find Pork Chop Express t-shirts, all over the place online. People love this movie.
For sure. It's an interesting, it definitely has that cult following though. Let's talk a little bit about Lo Pan, because he becomes a pretty huge focus of this, and the reason that these people are kidnapped is because Lo Pan, is, he hasn't been seen in a while. There's a sighting because Jack runs over him.
Yeah.
And they're like, whoa, Lopan, what about this? How's this coming to head? And, he's this spirit who needs to marry a green-eyed woman to become human again.
Yes.
And, he's just a weird bad guy, right?
He's really
because
weird.
He's not super threatening except when he goes, "Arr!" and his
lasers come out of his face.
Glowing,
yeah.
But like outside of that, he's not super threatening. It's just like this legend of him. And we kind of slowly get his history kind of revealed to us over time. It's just really interesting. Really well done, too, by
James Hong.
Yeah,
he what I love about his portrayal of this character, I love the duality between the old, decrepit, wheelchair-bound guy. When he does the transformation and we see it and that the whole body is glowing, it's really unsettling. It's quite creepy.
Yeah.
And actually, these are the same. This is the same special effects group that did Ghostbusters. I think that's one of the reasons why those the lightning between the hands, like all those things, feel very similar in terms of the style. One of the things I love about James Hong's presentation here as Lopan is that he's funny. Like he's really sarcastic and just really like, oh great, yeah, no, that's gonna do it. Like these kinds of asides that you don't ever
Can't
really
you die already?
Yeah, like you don't expect that from the big bad, and so it's really fun to get those little bits and pieces. And I think as a character, he's just really interesting. I do think that this reoccurring the green-eyed, I need the green-eyed girl kind of aspect is a little like I don't know. I was like when they finally did this ceremony with the sword. Where at first I was like, okay, so he's hypnotized the two girls, and now his henchmen are doing calisthenics in front of them.
Yeah.
I don't know what this is about. And then the swords come out and it lifts them up. And, once they did that ceremony, I was like, oh, okay. Because he had kept talking about the green-eyed girls taming the burning blade. And I was like, is that like a euphemism for like a condition that Lopan has? Because I don't think green-eyed girls is going to do it. I think he needs to go to a doctor maybe and get some kind of an ointment for his burning dragon. I don't think that's how that works.
Yeah, that's an STD.
Yeah, and then they were like, oh, it worked. He tamed the girls. They both tamed the flaming dragon or the flaming sword or whatever. And I was like, oh, it's not a euphemism. Maybe that's why he's in that wheelchair.
Yeah, so I love the technical side of this movie. I do again have to say that it was pretty tough to relate to the characters, or not necessarily to relate to them, but to care about them because there's so much going on. They're wandering around a lot, and you get the inevitable flirting with Kim Cattrall, right? And you get
it's hard for me to concentrate with you. Keep rubbing your body up next to me while they're in like the sewer tunnel. Like that doesn't seem very romantic.
But and his one-liners are good. Are they enough to hold the movie? I don't know about that, but
I think they are.
They're pretty good. He's a good leading man, no doubt.
I think the way that Carpenter subverts what we know should happen, which is that Jack Burton is the hero, really works for me. It kept working.
For sure. And knowing that after the fact definitely makes me appreciate it more.
He knocks himself out right before the end of the big fight.
I know. Yeah, like again, not a heroic thing to do.
No, it's perfect. Well, and I remember as a kid, like not liking that, being like, "Oh, that's dumb," or like when right before they face Lopan, she kisses him and he has the lipstick on his face. And I remember as a kid being like, "Oh, that's dumb. Like he doesn't look like a badass." And as an adult, I'm like, I love that. That's fantastic.
What about the three storms here?
The three storms.
They have these wild, huge hats.
Yes.
And they all have special powers. It actually kind of reminded me of the this is totally a random reference, but in Desperado, the Robert Rodriguez one.
Oh yeah,
where they have the three guys who like, Hua.
Oh, I'm sure.
It was
I'm
like
sure that
it reminded me of those three guys that the henchmen that they hire at the end of the movie to kill the bad guy.
So
that was the Asian version of that.
So it's interesting that you mentioned Robert Rodriguez because there actually may be a connection here. So I'm gonna do. Can I do a little Professor Bullshit?
Yes.
Deep dive for a second here.
That's what we're here for.
So there was a graphic novel manga, right? From the 80s called Lone Wolf and Cub. It was basically about a samurai, and he has to leave his whole family behind. They get killed, and all that he has left is it's the samurai and then his baby boy. And so it's this series of adventures, Lone Wolf and Cub, and they ended up turning them into a series of films also. But when it was just a graphic novel, when it was just a manga, Frank Miller did a lot of the drawings for it, did a lot of the covers, so there might be a Sin City connection here.
Yep.
And then also John Carpenter, as well as several other notable pop culture figures through the 80s and into the 90s, were super influenced by this graphic novel. There is a trio, these three brothers who are assassins who go after the lone wolf in one of the books, which was turned into a movie, and those three brothers look exactly like the Three Storms, and they all have specific weapons that they use. They don't have magic, but they have the giant basket hats.
That's cool.
Now,
one of them is totally stealing Raiden from Mortal Kombat, though.
In reverse, Raiden was based upon lightning. Yeah, lightning came first.
I guess that's true.
Raiden wins. Flawless victory. Fatality.
One last feather in the cap for Lone Wolf and Cub. That story I just told you about the samurai with his son was the direct influence for the original graphic novel Road to Perdition.
Oh, weird.
That then the book was, or the movie was then based on that graphic novel.
Wow.
So this one particular manga is like responsible for like all, and of course, it needs to be mentioned, manga is Japanese, so Carpenter switched culturally for these three, which is interesting because they do look way more like samurai with those giant basket hats than they do maybe like some kind of a Chinese
I feel
warrior.
like at a point he was probably defined by that for a little while, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's I think that look is so unique, and I just think that those characters, same with Lopan though, like Lopan is as a character is such an iconic, I mean, even at the time when the movie wasn't doing super well, I can remember back into the 80s, like that image of Lopan with his super long coke nails and the whole thing is like, it's very iconic.
I think Edgar Wright definitely stole from this movie. If you look at the fight scenes at the end, then the fight scenes at the end of Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yes, well, and
there's
a
lot of
the corny zoom-ins. Yeah. Like the Edgar Wright, like corny zoom-ins, like that is so apparent here, as well as like side wipes and circle wipes, and like, I mean, Carpenter was like, this is gonna be cheesy.
I forgot the name of the director. Damn it! It's the guy who did Kung Fu Hustle. I think obviously Stephen Chow.
Stephen Chow. Yes.
And what was the Shaolin Soccer? Like those kind of movies definitely stole from those types of movies that we're referencing. That probably Carpenter was inspired by, but also these movies that Carpenter made.
Yeah, the Jiangxi movies. I'm sure that there is I think it's a whole subgenre of this style of kind of corny horror, right? Like mixed with martial arts. Yep. But to a Western audience, I think for us, we were like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, for sure.
And it's interesting too, because if you compare again to like Golden Child, there is a mysticism there, but it doesn't live like sort of immersed within the cultural aspects the way that this does.
Yeah.
When they go underground and they're in those tunnels and the black blood of the earth. Like I love that moment because he's like, "Oh, you mean oil?" And he's like, "I mean the black blood of the earth." Like, and you're like, "Yeah, I'm not speaking in code, right?
Yeah.
This isn't symbolic."
Yeah, no, it's a fun rewatch. I'm glad we watched it. It was an interesting movie. He definitely has the best line, saves the best one-liner at the end. We really shook the pillars of heaven, didn't we, Wang?
Yeah.
Great line to go out on.
I think the other great line is when she says, "You're not going to kiss her goodbye," and he's like, "No,
nope."
I was just like, yeah, man, that's awesome.
Badass.
That is badass.
Funny that we have this very scene at the very beginning of Egg Shen, with the cop kind of trying to reference, hey, what really happened? Jack's missing and his truck's gone, and he's like, leave Jack alone.
Yeah.
That scene was asked to be put in there by the studio because they didn't understand that Jack wasn't supposed to be the hero.
Oh, that he was actually the sidekick.
So they're trying to frame like him in a good light. But do we even go back to that? Like, it's not even a bookend, right?
No, the only thing that I would imagine we never go back to. The only thing that I would imagine is that meeting with Egg is after.
Yeah, totally.
Is after the monster with the semi at the end, because the big hairy Chewbacca monster, which I love, by the way. I love that thing.
I love the eyeball monster that can see that Lopan can see through.
Did you ever play D&D when you were a kid?
No.
So there is like a super famous monster from the old 80s D&D called the Beholder, and I guess the joke is sort of like he's the eye of the beholder.
Gotcha.
But it basically was this fleshy ball
idea.
covered in eyes with like weird tentacles. And I'm like, is that an homage? I mean, it could very well not be. And somebody was like, John, look what I made. And they just have like this meatball with eyes all over it. But I was like, it looks so much like it. And this came out in 86. So I'm like, it's just different enough that it isn't it. But I was like, I wonder if there's an influence there. I don't know.
No doubt.
I mean, I feel like Carpenter does that. I think he just loves to pull little bits and pieces from kind of all over the place. Because again, you remember when we were talking about Starman and how in an interview he had said, road trip love story movies like the 39 Steps. And you're like, that's what was on your mind when doing Starman?
Hitchcock,
He did the same thing here. He says, the characters in the film reminded me of the characters in like Bringing Up Baby or His Girl Friday.
That's right. I remember reading that, yeah.
And it does make sense because there is some really fast back and forth between him and Kim Cattrall.
Yeah, for sure.
But again,
pre-mannequin.
Pre-mannequin Kim Cattrall.
This actually came out, this was the movie right before Mannequin.
Does it ever bum you out that we're getting so old that benchmark references like that? Someone's like, where was a mannequin?
What the fuck is Mannequin?
I didn't see a mannequin in the
people.
movie. But you know what I mean? You're like, this is a watermark.
It's one of the greatest movies of all time.
You were one sick puppy.
Because maybe somebody's going to be like, he told me to go watch Mannequin. I'm going to go watch it. And then they're like sitting there watching it with the like, Hollywood. And they're like, what's happening right now?
Why is this the greatest movie?
Why is this a benchmark movie of something being before or after it?
Awesome. Awesome festival. Really fun to revisit some things I haven't seen in a while from him.
Oh, totally.
I think we learned a lot. It was quite fun. So if you guys liked what you saw, definitely like and subscribe and search for us for the Deep Dive Film School. Give us 5-star rating on iTunes, all that stuff.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Next week, we are going to do a punishment review of the one and only Mac. Speaking of best movies in the world, Mac and Me.
Just for those of you who may not know, basically, we're going to be kicking off our punishment review sort of fest with this movie, with the idea being that every
it's not even a festival.
It's
an
just an
ongoing segment that we're going to do.
Yeah, a legacy segment. How about that?
Yeah, write in. Let us know what you want us to do.
Yes, punish us with the worst movie that you can think of.
Well, we're going to get a lot of comments, hopefully. All right. Thanks for listening and watching, guys. We'll talk to you next week.
See ya. I really wish that you could have made it to my Halloween party.
I did.
Did you? You must have shown up late because somebody showed up and they were amazing. It was, you might know him. It was Captain Dumbass of the North.
Yes. The Knight's drunk.
Captain Dumbass of the Knight's drunk. When was the last time that you think that you've been like that? Because I swear I haven't seen you like that for, I don't know, maybe Probably more than 5 years.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Especially in public.
Sometimes you... That's I think the most impressive part to me is like that was like party number 2 for you. Like you got to that point and then you were like, I'm gonna go to Sherlock's, and you came in.
I can't miss your fucking Halloween party.
I know, and I'm so glad you made it. It was amazing because I was sitting outside,
it wasn't amazing,
talking to somebody, and you like came out, and your costume was. I do have a good picture of it, which it's a good looking costume, but then you were like, you like stomped out, and I was like, yeah, you made it. And keep in mind, it was like 9:45, like it was not late at all
when I showed up.
Yeah, and you got like an inch from my face, and I was like, that's a great costume, and you got like an inch from my face, and you're like, the fuck do you know about it? Was the first thing you said to me.
I don't remember
I
that.
know. And then I started talking to you. I was like, I just laughed, and then I started talking to you about something else, like not costume related, and after I did for a minute, you like looked at me and you were like, I got snow on me too because I'm Jon Snow. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be good. It was good. It was good stuff.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine, man. It's amazing.
Oh, fuck.
It was amazing. It was just like... I was like... The next day I was like, I wonder if he had fun. I wonder if he...
It looks like I did. I'm glad everyone knows this now. So happy.